She only needed one last infusion to keep the cancer from coming back. But instead, her boss sent an email canceling her health insurance while she was still hooked up to the IV drip. He thought he was cutting costs. She quietly reopened a folder he should have never let her create. And this time, she wasn't aiming for him, she was aiming for the whole damn system. My name is Marla Jensen, and I was 39 years old the day my boss tried to kill me with a spreadsheet. The IV needle was still in my arm when my phone buzzed. I almost didn't check it. The nurses at Riverside Cancer Center had this thing about phones during chemo, but something about the notification sound made my stomach drop. Maybe it was instinct, maybe it was just the nausea from the drugs. Either way, I swiped open the email that would change everything. Dear employee, it began, not even my name, just employee. Your health insurance coverage through Ventronic Systems has been terminated effective immediately. Please contact HR regarding COBRA continuation options. I read it 3 times before the words actually registered. The chemical cocktail dripping into my veins suddenly felt cold as ice. This was my last treatment. The one my oncologist said would make the difference between remission and recurrence. The one that cost $47,000 without insurance. Everything okay, hun? The nurse Patricia, who'd been with me through 6 months of this hell, noticed my face. My throat closed up. How do you explain that your employer just sentenced you to death by bureaucracy? I made it to my car before I broke down. Not crying, I was too angry for tears. My hands shook as I gripped the steering wheel. The bandage on my arm already spotting red where I'd yanked the IV out too fast. The parking garage smelled like exhaust and despair, and somewhere in the distance, an ambulance wailed. My phone rang. Rick Hardley's name flashed on the screen, and I almost threw it out the window. Our new CFO. 6 months on the job and already leaving a trail of bodies, metaphorical ones. Until now, I let it go to voicemail. But he called again immediately. Marla, we need you in the office. Emergency budget meeting. I'm at treatment, I managed. Was at treatment, he corrected, and I could hear the smugness bleeding through the phone. Check your email. Meeting starts in 30 minutes. The drive back to Ventronic Systems took 23 minutes. I know because I counted every second, trying to keep my mind off the poison already multiplying in my cells, waiting for its next chance. The company's glass tower gleamed in the afternoon sun like a middle finger extended toward the sky. I'd worked here for 12 years, started as a junior analyst, worked my way up to senior systems oversight. I knew every contract, every vendor, every dirty little secret they thought was buried in the data. The conference room was already full when I walked in. Rick sat at the head of the table in his $8,000 suit, surrounded by his hand-picked yes-men. The old guard people who'd been here since the beginning sat clustered at the far end like refugees. Marla, glad you could make it. Rick didn't look up from his laptop. We're implementing some aggressive cost optimization strategies. Cost optimization. Corporate speak for fuck you, I got mine. He launched into his presentation, all charts and projections and buzzwords designed to obscure the simple truth he was gutting employee benefits to juice the quarterly numbers. Health insurance for non-executives was the first casualty. Retirement matching was next. Even the coffee in the break room was switching to generic. This is illegal, someone said. I think it was Janet from procurement. You can't cancel health insurance without notice, without... We consulted legal, Rick interrupted. Everything is within company guidelines. I raised my hand like a school kid. What about employees currently undergoing treatment? He finally looked at me then, and his eyes were as flat and cold as a shark's. COBRA continuation is available at the employee's expense. I believe the information is in your termination packet. Termination. Oh, didn't I mention we're also restructuring the analytics department? Your position has been eliminated. Security will escort you out after the meeting. The room spun. I gripped the edge of the table, feeling the cheap veneer under my fingertips. 12 years. 12 years of 60-hour weeks, of catching their errors, of keeping their secrets. And this was how it ended, dying of cancer in a conference room, while a man who couldn't even read a P&L report explained why my life was a line item to be cut. But here's the thing about treating someone like they're already dead. They've got nothing left to lose. I smiled. It must have been unsettling because Rick actually flinched. Of course, I said, my voice steady as a flatline. I'll just need to transfer my files. 12 years of institutional knowledge. You understand. Wouldn't want anything to get lost in the transition. He waved dismissively. It will handle all that. If you say so. I stood, gathering my things with deliberate calm. Though you might want to ask them about the vendor oversight protocols and the supplier audit trails, and especially the interesting discrepancies in the Q3 equipment procurement reports from 2022. The room went quiet. Rick's jaw tightened. Is that a threat, Ms. Jensen? Threat, I laughed, and it sounded like breaking glass. I'm just a dying woman worried about proper documentation. Wouldn't want Ventronics to suffer from any unfortunate oversights after I'm gone. Security was waiting outside 2 kids who looked embarrassed to be there. They followed me to my cubicle, where I made a show of packing up my personal items. Coffee mug with the motivational quote, stress ball shaped like a brain, picture of my sister's kids, and 1 mint tin, tucked in the back of my drawer. That rattled when I picked it up. Just mints, I told the guards, shaking it. They didn't ask to look inside. They walked me to my car like I was a criminal, 12 years, and I didn't even get to say goodbye to anyone. But I sat in my car again, in that same exhaust-scented garage, and opened that mint tin. Inside was a flash drive labeled "In case of emergency." Well, I thought, if this isn't an emergency, I don't know what is. The emergency budget meeting had been a masterclass in corporate cruelty. Rick Hardley stood at the whiteboard, drawing circles and arrows like he was diagramming a football play instead of destroying lives. I sat there, still feeling the ghost of the IV needle in my arm, watching him dismantle everything that made Ventronics even remotely human. The executive team has identified significant redundancies in our benefit structure, he said, uncapping another marker. This one was red, of course. Effective immediately, we're transitioning to a more sustainable model. Sustainable. There's a word that's been tortured to death in corporate America. Janet from procurement raised her hand again. Brave woman. Rick, people depend on these benefits. We have employees with chronic conditions, families with special needs children. All covered under COBRA, he interrupted, not even turning from his diagram. The Consolidated Omnibus Budget Reconciliation Act ensures continuity of coverage. At 700% of the premium cost, I said quietly. Every head turned to look at me. Rick's marker squeaked against the whiteboard. The exact percentage varies, he said carefully. Not for cancer patients, I continued, my voice staying remarkably steady. I did the math on the drive over. My treatments cost $47,000 per session. Insurance negotiates that down to $12,000, under COBRA. I'd pay $2,800 a month in premiums, plus 20% coinsurance. That's $11,400 per treatment, times 12 remaining sessions. I pulled out my phone. Calculator app already open. $136,800 to not die. The room was silent except for the fluorescent lights humming overhead. Someone's coffee cup clinked against a saucer. These decisions aren't personal, Marla. Rick finally turned to face me, and his expression was what passed for sympathy in his world, which is to say, it looked like constipation. We have a fiduciary responsibility to our shareholders. Right, I nodded. And my responsibility to keep breathing is what? Exactly a lifestyle choice. If you'd like to discuss your specific situation. Oh, I'd love to. I stood up, and maybe it was the chemo, or maybe it was pure rage, but I felt absolutely steady on my feet. Let's discuss how Ventronics Systems recorded $8.6 million in net profit last quarter. Let's discuss your base salary of $470,000, not counting bonuses. Let's discuss the company retreat to Cabo that cost more than my entire annual treatment plan. How do you know about... He caught himself, but it was too late. Everyone had heard it. I'm in data oversight. Rick was... It's literally my job to know where every penny goes. I smiled, and it felt like baring teeth. Including the $38,000 charge to client entertainment that mysteriously coincided with your anniversary trip to Paris. His face went through several colors, none of them healthy. Are you threatening me, Ms. Jensen? I'm having a conversation about sustainable business models. Isn't that what we're here for? He set down the marker with excessive care. Your termination is effective immediately. Security will escort you out. They're already waiting outside, I said. You're nothing if not efficient. But I wasn't done. Not yet. One question, though, I continued, gathering my things with deliberate slowness. When you restructure the analytics department, who's going to handle the vendor audit reports, the ones due next week? We'll manage. And the supplier verification protocols, the ones that require my specific access codes? It will. And the discrepancy investigations, the ones that flag unusual spending patterns? I paused at the door, looking back at the room full of people who were just realizing what they were about to lose. The ones that already flagged several interesting patterns this quarter. Rick's assistant, a nervous kid named Bradley, actually dropped his tablet. It clattered on the conference table like a gavel. "Get out," Rick said quietly. "Already going." I opened the door where security was indeed waiting, looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. "Oh, but Rick, you might want to check the February audit logs. Page 47, Section C, just a friendly heads up from a former employee." The beautiful thing about being in data oversight is that you see everything, every receipt, every transaction, every creative interpretation of business expense. For 12 years, I'd been the person who made sure the numbers added up. I'd been the one who caught the errors, fixed the discrepancies, and when asked, looked the other way. They'd trained me to spot patterns. They'd given me access to everything. They'd trusted me to be a good soldier. Their first mistake was thinking I'd stay loyal after they canceled my right to live. Their second was forgetting that I'd been building my own insurance policy for years. Not the kind that covers cancer treatment, the kind that covers your ass when the company you've bled for decides you're expendable. As security marched me past the cubicles of people I'd worked with for over a decade, I saw the looks on their faces. Fear, mostly, some sympathy. A few seemed to be calculating their own odds of survival. "Marla," someone whispered. It was David from my team, my former team. "I'm so sorry." I stopped, causing my escorts to bump into each other like rookies. "David, quick question. You remember that folder I shared with you last year? The one about backup protocols?" His eyes widened. "The mint green one." "That's the one. Might want to review it, thoroughly. Share it with the team." "Move along," one of the guards said, but he sounded uncertain. I moved along. All right. Right out of the building. Into the afternoon sun that felt like mockery on my skin. But I was smiling as I opened my car door. As I placed my sad box of personal items in the back seat. As I pulled out of the parking garage for what would be the last time. Because in that mint tin, rattling against my thigh as I drove, was 12 years of receipts. 12 years of documentation. 12 years of evidence that Rick Hardley and his executive team had been treating Ventronic systems like their personal piggy bank. They thought they were cutting costs by getting rid of me. They had no idea what I was about to cost them. The mint tin sat on my kitchen counter like a grenade with the pin pulled. I'd driven home on autopilot, my hands steady on the wheel even as my mind raced through 12 years of data points, connections, and carefully documented sins. The house felt different now, less like a home, more like a war room. I made myself a cup of tea with shaking hands, Earl Grey, because even revenge requires some civility. Then I sat down at my dining table, pushed aside the stack of medical bills I couldn't pay anymore, and opened that innocent-looking tin. The flash drive inside was smaller than my thumb, but it held enough explosive power to level a corporate tower. I'd labeled it simply, "Only open when everything goes to hell." Well, hello, hell. Nice to finally meet you. I plugged it into my personal laptop, the one Ati had never touched, the one I'd bought with my own money for personal projects. The folder structure bloomed across my screen like a poisonous flower. Vendor Irregularities 2019 to 2024. Executive Expenses. Flagged Items. Contract Modifications. Unauthorized. Ghost Invoices. Confirmed. Phantom Consulting Fees. The Paris Files. The Cabo Chronicles. Operation Clean Hands. Dirty Reality. My fingers hovered over the trackpad. Once I opened these files, there was no going back. But then again, there was already no going back. My cancer wasn't going to pause while I considered the ethics of the situation. I clicked on the Paris Files first. The receipts unfolded like a sordid novel. Rick's anniversary trip, billed as a European vendor summit, $38,000, the Ritz-Carlton, First-class flights, meals at restaurants where the wine cost more than my monthly mortgage, all charged to client entertainment, all signed off by, oh, that's interesting, CFO signs his own expense reports. How convenient. But that was just the appetizer. Ghost invoices, confirmed, was the main course. 3 years ago, I'd noticed something odd in our vendor payment system. Invoices from companies that existed only on paper, services that were never rendered, equipment that never arrived, small amounts at first 10,000 here, 15 there, nothing that would trigger the automated audit flags. But I wasn't an automated system. I was a human being with pattern recognition and a stubborn streak. I'd tracked 23 shell companies, all registered to the same address in Delaware, all receiving regular payments from Ventronics. Total damage, $3.7 million, and every single payment authorized by someone in the C-suite. Phantom consulting fees was even better. Consulting firms that consulted on nothing. Strategy sessions that never happened. Reports that were never written. But the checks cleared just fine. Deposited into accounts that traced back to. My phone rang. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. The truly beautiful part was how sloppy they'd gotten. When you think you're untouchable, you stop covering your tracks. They'd used company email to coordinate. They'd discussed their schemes in Slack channels they thought were private. They'd even celebrated their optimizations in group texts that IT backed up to the cloud. And I had screenshots of everything. My phone rang again. This time I recognized the number David from my team. Marla, what the hell is in that folder? His voice was barely above a whisper. Insurance, I said simply. The real kind or the kind that gets people arrested? Both. There was a long pause. I could hear office sounds in the background, keyboards clicking, phones ringing, the ordinary soundtrack of corporate life continuing while mine fell apart. They're already trying to lock down your access, he said finally. It's been scrambling since you left. But the folder, it's been copied, multiple times. Good. Marla, this stuff, if even half of it is real. It's all real. David, every receipt, every email, every forged signature, 3 years of evidence, all verified, all cross-referenced. I took a sip of my cooling tea. Did you know Rick charged the company $60,000 for a team-building workshop that was actually his son's wedding? Jesus. Jesus had nothing to do with it, but the IRS might be interested. Another pause. What are you going to do? I looked at my laptop screen, at the dozens of folders I hadn't even opened yet. Vendor kickback schemes, manipulated bid processes, a particularly creative interpretation of equipment testing that involved a lot of golf courses. David, do you remember what Rick said in the meeting about fiduciary responsibility? Yeah. Well, I have a responsibility too. To every employee who's going to lose their health care, to everyone who got laid off while executives got bonuses, to every shareholder who thinks their investment is being managed ethically. Marla. Share the folder, David. Share it wide, but not on company channels, they'll delete it. Personal emails only. This could destroy the company. No, I corrected him. They destroyed the company. I'm just documenting the demolition. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen and organized my evidence properly. Not the hasty screenshots and quick notes I'd gathered over the years, but a proper prosecutorial package, spreadsheets with color-coded violations, emails arranged chronologically to show intent and conspiracy, financial documents that painted a clear picture of systematic fraud. Each section got its own folder. Red for federal crimes, orange for SEC violations, yellow for IRS interest, green for shareholder lawsuits, blue for media scandals. By the time I finished, the sun was setting, painting my kitchen in shades of gold and shadow. My tea was cold, my head was pounding from the chemo, and my hands were steady as stone. The mint tin sat empty now, its purpose fulfilled. But on my laptop screen was something far more dangerous than a flash drive could ever be the truth, meticulously documented and ready to deploy. They'd canceled my health insurance thinking they were cutting costs. They had no idea what they'd actually unleashed. I opened a new browser window and started typing Department of Justice Whistleblower Program, then another SEC fraud reporting, and another IRS tax evasion submission. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "We need to talk about your severance package. RH." I smiled and typed back, "Yes, Rick, we certainly do." Then I hit enter on my first submission. The next 72 hours were a masterclass in data warfare. I transformed my dining room into a command center. My laptop surrounded by color-coded notebooks, printed spreadsheets, and enough coffee to fuel a small startup. The chemo made me nauseous, but rage is one hell of an antiemetic. I started with the foundation, building an airtight case that would stand up to any legal scrutiny. Every piece of evidence needed context, verification, and a clear chain of custody. This wasn't just about revenge anymore, this was about justice, and justice required precision. The red folder came first, federal crimes. Wire fraud was the appetizer. With 67 documented cases of fraudulent invoices crossing state lines, each one meticulously traced from creation to payment, complete with forged signatures I'd verified against legitimate documents. The main course was conspiracy to defraud the United States, featuring Rick's creative approach to government contracts, dessert money laundering through those Delaware shell companies, with a paper trail so clear a first-year law student could follow it. I created a spreadsheet that would make a forensic accountant weep with joy. Every fraudulent transaction got its own row: date initiated, parties involved, amount stolen, method used, supporting documentation, legal statute violated, red cells for confirmed fraud, darker red for amounts over 100,000. By the time I finished, my screen looked like a crime scene. The orange folder, SEC violations, was almost too easy. Ventronics was publicly traded, which meant every lie they told investors was a federal offense. I had earnings calls where executives claimed record efficiency while hiding millions in theft, board meeting minutes where they discussed aggressive accounting practices, emails joking about keeping auditors in the dark. My personal favorite was a Slack message from Rick to the CEO. "Those Q3 numbers look too clean. Investors might get suspicious. Maybe throw in some minor losses to make it look realistic." Screenshot, archived, cataloged. The yellow folder made me laugh despite everything. IRS violations. These idiots had been so focused on stealing from the company that they'd forgotten to pay taxes on their ill-gotten gains. Rick's consulting fees to his brother-in-law's firm, no 1099s filed. The executive team's business trips, that were really vacations, deducted as expenses without proper documentation. I built a separate spreadsheet for the IRS, calculating not just the unpaid taxes, but the penalties and interest. The total made my eyes water more than my entire lifetime earnings at Ventronics. By 11:45 p.m. on the second night, I was deep in the green folder shareholder lawsuits. This was where it got personal. Every employee who'd been laid off while executives got bonuses. Every investor who'd been lied to about company performance. Every pension fund that had trusted Ventronics with retirement savings. I documented it all: names, dates, amounts, the human cost of corporate greed laid out in Arial 12-point font. My phone had been buzzing constantly. Texts from former colleagues, calls from numbers I didn't recognize, emails with increasingly desperate subject lines, urgent severance discussion, confidential mutual agreement proposal, time-sensitive legal matter. I ignored them all, let them sweat. By the third day, I had everything organized into a prosecutorial masterpiece, but data without action is just numbers on a screen. Time for deployment. I started with the anonymous tip lines: FBI, SEC, IRS. Each got their own carefully crafted submission with relevant evidence attached. I used different VPNs for each one, different email addresses, different writing styles, paranoid maybe. But I'd learned from the best corporate criminals how to cover tracks. The FBI submission focused on the wire fraud and money laundering. 200 pages of documentation, compressed and encrypted. The SEC got everything related to investor fraud, another 150 pages. The IRS received a Christmas morning's worth of tax evasion evidence. But government agencies move slowly. I needed faster pressure. So I created one more folder, blue for media scandals. Inside went the juiciest, most headline-worthy revelations. Rick's son's wedding charged as a business expense, the CEO's mistress on the payroll as a logistics consultant, The infamous Cabo retreat, where they'd spent $80,000 on something listed only as team morale enhancement, but which Instagram revealed to be cocaine and escorts. I packaged it all into a single, devastating file. Executive summary: how Ventronic Systems stole millions while firing cancer patients. My phone rang again. This time, I answered. Ms. Jensen. The voice was unfamiliar, nervous. This is Bradley Kowalski from Legal. Mr. Hardley asked me to... Let me guess, I interrupted. Generous severance package in exchange for an NDA and returning all company property. Yes. How did you... Bradley, how old are you? 26. Let me give you some free career advice. When your boss asks you to negotiate hush money with someone who has evidence of federal crimes, you update your resume. You update it immediately. Silence. Then, quietly, is it really that bad? Check your email in about 10 minutes. Personal email, not company. You'll see exactly how bad it is. I hung up and opened my email client. Time to paint the target. First, I sent copies to every member of the board of directors. Personal emails only I'd gathered those over the years from various company events. Subject line: urgent evidence of executive fraud at Ventronic Systems. Then to the major shareholders, the institutional investors who owned 60% of the company. They deserved to know their money was being stolen. Finally, I crafted an email to 3 journalists who specialized in corporate fraud, 2 from the Wall Street Journal, 1 from Forbes. I'd followed their work for years, knew their interests, their styles, their hunger for a story that mattered. Dear Ms. Rodriguez, I began, I have documentation of a multi-million-dollar fraud scheme at Ventronic Systems, including evidence that executives terminated employees' health insurance to cover up their crimes. Full documentation attached. I'm available for interview under condition of anonymity. Send. Then I sat back in my chair, exhausted but exhilarated. 3 days of work, 3 years of evidence, 12 years of loyalty repaid with a death sentence. They thought they were cutting costs by firing me. They had no idea what I'd just cost them. My laptop dinged. New email. Already. Bradley from Legal. Personal account. Holy shit. Is this all real? I smiled and typed back. Every word, every number, every crime. Update that resume. Bradley. Ventronic Systems is about to become a case study in business schools. The cautionary kind. Outside my window, the sun was setting again. Another day survived without treatment. Another day closer to whatever came next. But for the first time since that IV needle slid out of my arm, I felt something other than despair. I felt powerful. They'd tried to bury me. They forgot I knew where all the bodies were buried. The first response came at 6:17 a.m., 3 days after I'd pulled the trigger. I was making breakfast plain toast. All my stomach could handle these days when my phone lit up with a call from a blocked number. Ms. Jensen. This is Special Agent Sarah Winters with the FBI's White Collar Crime Division. We received your submission regarding Ventronic Systems. We'd like to discuss this in person. My hand trembled slightly as I set down my coffee. This was real now. No takebacks. I can meet today, I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded. Excellent. Are you familiar with the Federal Building downtown 2 p.m., Suite 1200? Bring any physical evidence you might have. Physical evidence. I looked at my laptop, at the external drives I'd backed everything up on, at the printed documents I'd been annotating. 3 years of my life condensed into bankers' boxes. I'll be there. The SEC called an hour later, then the IRS. By noon, I had meetings scheduled for the entire week. Each agency wanted their own piece of Ventronics, and I was more than happy to serve it up on a silver platter. But the email that made me actually laugh out loud came from Lisa Rodriguez at the Wall Street Journal. Marla, I've reviewed your documents. This is Pulitzer material. Can we meet today? I'm flying to Chicago tonight if you're available. Pulitzer material. My cancer treatment money had been stolen to fund someone's Pulitzer story. The irony was so thick you could spread it on toast. I agreed to meet her after my FBI appointment. Might as well make it a full day of corporate destruction. The Federal Building loomed like a gray monument to bureaucratic justice. I wheeled my little cart of evidence boxes through security. earning curious looks from the guards. Just another whistleblower, nothing to see here. Special Agent Winters turned out to be a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s